Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webcast this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're talking about Windows 10 and some of the information around how it's been disruptive for a lot of IT departments. So we have a lot of great information today, and we're going to jump right into it. My name's Heidi Flagg. I'm the moderator for today, and I also have a great group of experts that we've pulled together for this discussion. So I'll just do some quick intros here, and we'll get things going. So you can see these nice photos up on the slide here. I'll let you know. First of all, we have Eric Nymark, our Director of Engineering. Eric manages all of our new feature development and recently introduced our imaging over the internet feature. So he's kind of our go-to guy, and if we can dream it, he can build it, which is awesome. Jeff Harris, he spends his day helping IT teams better manage their Windows devices. And then in his spare time, he's sharing quick how-to and tech tip videos on our YouTube channel and currently has over 70,000 video views. So you can check him out on YouTube. Alan Marsh, he has spent 10 years in IT at Boeing and now has spent another 10 years as the CTO at Smart Deploy. And Alan has a deep technical understanding of all things Windows and hardware related. Spencer Dunford has been with Smart Deploy from day one. 14 years later, he continues to stay connected with customers and finds creative solutions to their complex issues. And lastly, Aaron Suzuki, our CEO and founder. Aaron has built a technical consulting firm as well as our IT software business from the ground up over the last 15 years. His adventurous and entrepreneurial spirit is felt throughout our organization on a daily basis and has led to much success for his companies. So that's the team we have. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get things started, and I'm going to hand things over to Aaron.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. And thanks, everyone, for joining. And a special thanks to our existing customers for your business and for your loyalty. It's been a really great ride so far, and we look forward to getting more of you on board with what we're doing. Just a really quick couple thoughts on why we're here and how we got here. We got into this from, as Heidi pointed out, this consulting business that we continue to operate and saw some ways that we could make things much more efficient by using virtual machines. And it was really when we started listening more to all of you, to customers and prospective customers, about what really mattered and where you were feeling pain, that we got increasingly determined to make this old job genuinely faster and easier. And that's all we're here to do. We are an independent software company, and it seems like the more attention we give to you and the more focused we are on building tools and capabilities that you really want, the more you reward us, not only with your business, but with your return business. And for that, we're truly grateful. There are a lot of different kinds of companies who really do well with our product. And you can see a few of those examples here, but we continue to stay focused exclusively on making this job easier, on making endpoint management an achievable job with fewer hours of your hours and less frustration. That's really what we're about. And that's what today's webcast is about. You know, we're deep in the throes of Windows 10, which is sort of this new mode of the way that Microsoft is doing things, applying continuous deployment to an operating system. And we consider ourselves friends of Microsoft's. We think that they achieve seemingly the near impossible by putting out a product so large and comprehensive. With that said, Windows 10 has been not without its problems. So as our timeline here shows, we went from Windows 7 and, sort of the classic 3-year release cycle approximately to Windows 8, almost another 3 years to Windows 10. And now we're on this kind of twice-a-year cadence that has very much been lit up in the news, and things are happening in those updates that are more than just incremental updates. We're seeing lots of new features, and they're trying to pack a lot into it with varying degrees of success. And I guess this is the concern and frustration that we all have, which is, why are we getting these updates when they're less than perfectly reliable? Why are they trying to do so much so fast and, kind of treating this operating system that we rely on to do our work as something that can be sort of messed with the kind of freedom of a social media app on my phone. And so we sort of have this entertaining frustration meter from the low end being pretty benign things to the high end being extremely painful things. And we know that we're all riding this together. So we're going to spend the next 20 plus minutes talking about this in some detail, but we want to know generally from you where you are in your Windows 10 migration. We know that most all of our customers have completed it. Some of you have not even begun it. Some of you are operating in a hybrid mode, running some Windows 10 workstations and some still on Windows 7 for various reasons, whether it's application compatibility or just the time it takes to get the migration done. I'm curious to know and understand more about where you are, and we can use that information to color some of the discussion that we're going to have here as we talk about some of the technical details that we want to get right into, as well as getting into how the product works, how some things like cloud delivery works for our product, and more. So with that, we'll turn the time over, I think, now to Jeff.
Yes, thanks, Aaron. That's me probably making the same gesture of whoever is in charge of this latest update is making, I'm sure. Hopefully you've only heard about and not experienced some of the problems with how Microsoft is delivering Windows 10, most notably this latest release, the October release 1809, which was bad enough that Microsoft released it on October 2nd, pulled it, and now we're into November without an updated, stable build. There were a couple of major issues impacting users, and the biggest issues were the deletion of files located in certain folders, which sounds pretty bad. If you upgrade to the latest version and lose data, not cool. In this instance, this happened when you change the location of, say, your documents folder to a folder on another drive, but you didn't move all of the files out of the original location. Those files in that original location were what were deleted. Then they attempted to address that bug, and a new bug appeared that would replace files from a zip file into the destination folder if they had the same name, which, again, is not great to be losing files like that, unless, you're looking for the excuse, teacher, the update ate my homework. The reports of other pretty basic things that you would never expect to break were also broken, like the Start and Action Center menus and internet access for a lot of users, and device drivers were breaking, so devices weren't working while pinning the CPU to 100% utilization, which is crazy. And, those reported bugs, that list goes on, and, your productivity takes a hit, so everyone's mad, and then you have cranky sysadmins, and you definitely don't want that. And this is kind of old hat, right? A lot of people roll their eyes and say to themselves, that's Microsoft with these updates, but this is becoming a pretty huge problem. These spring and fall updates are not trivial updates. They're major version upgrades, and they need to be treated as such. You don't want to jump in head first, because it's bad enough to be a home user, right? And you find yourself with an unexpected hour of downtime when one of these updates goes to install. And I know, because this happened to me, and I had to wait over an hour to play my video games, which I did not appreciate. Now imagine if this was your workstation, that would be even worse. By far, though, the biggest issue we hear from the field through the Smart Deploy support lines is related to sysprep. They update their VM, or they update their reference VM, and everything seems fine, but they're really doing an in-place upgrade. Then they capture their new image, and then they go through a deployment with Smart Deploy, and then all of a sudden they see these post-deployment problems like blank start menu tiles or a complete failure of sysprep altogether. And often it's centered around sysprep's inability to provision those start menu apps. And so, things like you come up and like, why is calculator gone? And so you think my VM's fine, but after I deploy it, it's broken, and that's because sysprep. And we do our best to mitigate these problems by updating Smart Deploy to bridge these sort of gaps. But we do recommend to always create a new virtual machine when you're wanting to install the newest version of Windows 10 rather than do an in-place upgrade. Build a new VM installing Windows from the ISO of the version that you want to go to. And then you hopefully you won't look like me with your hand in your palm on a late Friday trying to get your deployments done. And things will be better. But with that, I will hand it over to Alan, who will go into more detail about this sort of stuff.
Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, there's really this, we're talking about updating versus reimaging a machine, and Microsoft calls these the Windows 10 feature updates. When you go to install it, it looks like any other hotfix, but it's really an in-place upgrade, just like way back in Windows, Windows NT, you could run setup exe over the top of an install and go to the new version. It's still the same thing. Microsoft has been perfecting it, with each release, and they've certainly made it better, but it's still, running setup exe over the top of your existing install and using USMT to do a hard link in-place migration of all the user data and settings. So while they've got it to work really well, it sometimes can leave, the results can vary. So it also backs up the previous OS and leaves, at least 30 gigs on the machine. So you either have to kind of live with that, or you have to automate disk cleanup in order to get rid of that. We've just seen that with all these, you don't really have control. Outcome can vary widely, and so here's some examples of that. The recovery partition, the recovery environment itself keeps getting bigger, so Microsoft has changed the size of that partition with pretty much maybe every other release of Windows 10 along the way. It was 450 megs, then 500, now it's 550. But the upgrade, if you have one of the old partition sizes and the recovery environment isn't going to fit, it just makes a new partition out at the end of the drive. It does whatever it can to make that thing work out, and that's fine. But if you're trying to have something that's the same across the board, you're not getting same to same anymore. There's also an issue with 1803 Pro where Microsoft didn't shrink the size of the Windows recovery environment, so it didn't fit on the partition, so it would just put it on the OS partition, and then that means that it can't do everything that it's supposed to be able to do. Like Jeff said, start menu. Sometimes you'll get the old Apex package uninstalled, so you'll have a blank tile. You'll have the new tile, that you don't get a real consistent outcome in the tiles. During an upgrade, the other interesting thing is that if you have third-party antivirus software, that's running during that in-place upgrade. And it can interfere with how well that upgrade works. Sometimes it causes it to crash, and you'll notice that it caused a problem. Sometimes it doesn't really surface. You can't tell that it caused a problem, but it did. We know some of these interfere with it because some of our customers have antivirus programs that we have them install as a first boot task, because we've seen them either interfere with driver installs or crash mini setup. So when you do a reimage, that maybe wouldn't be running, but during the upgrade it is running. So that might be interfering with something. Microsoft's worked hard on this too. There was a recent knowledge base article that fixed access denied errors in situations like this. So they see the telemetry from this and they keep working on it, but again, the outcome can vary. Device drivers, you kind of end up in an unknown state. You most likely, during an upgrade, would have an unknown mix of drivers from the previous version of Windows 10, manufacturer drivers from the new versions of Windows 10, and probably some from Windows Update when it got done. So in our experience with our customers, you just get a better, more reliable outcome if you start fresh, meaning, like Jeff said, you create your virtual reference machine from an ISO of each major release, or reimage machines that are already deployed. You have to put in more work up front, but it's something identical every time, and it hasn't gone through that kind of unknown and pretty much undocumented upgrade process for Microsoft. So now I'll hand it off to Eric to talk more about managing your Windows 10 devices.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, that was perfect. Those are some great examples there. And as you can see on the slide, regardless of your environment, how you're hosting Windows 10, whether it be physical machines, virtual, whether you're looking at going to Windows Virtual Desktop, you're still going to have to deal with these major feature updates. And there are a couple different ways of doing it. In some scenarios, it may work for you to just let Microsoft determine the update schedule. That would mean just having Windows Update go and install those updates, but it's very important to understand when those are going to happen. Traditionally, there was a bit of time when the rollout actually happened. So with 1703, it took a couple months to really get general availability. But with the latest updates, we're seeing that those go out almost immediately. So the day that they RTM, we're seeing people having those installed automatically on their machines. And, if you're a smaller shop, that might work for you. You might be able to stay in front of a small number of users and answer any questions that might come up from that. If you have more endpoints to manage, it really gets important to understand your environment. So knowing what devices are on what version of Windows 10, knowing the update schedule around that, when they're going to actually start processing that update, and how you can actually start to begin to control that. So there are a number of different ways. You can use group policy to defer those updates for up to 35 days after they're released, or you can hold them off for 365 days if you want to be really exacting about it. Like Alan mentioned, as these recovery partitions change, that might be a good time to actually address the update process, because you could have been on the original release and then gone through the 6-7 different update processes on a single endpoint, and that, you can see that starts to get dirty when the partition is changed 3 times. It might be a good time to just actually look at blowing that machine away and starting fresh with only bringing over the user data. So there are a number of different tools that can help you get to this point of managing your actual updates, and you might be somewhere in the middle. You don't want complete control over everything, but you want control when it makes sense. So generally, we see people in the middle on this update schedule. They're not reimaging everything, obviously, or starting fresh with every update. But as things change enough, or as those devices start to age, it really makes sense to start fresh and start over. As far as tools go, there are a number of different options. So you have these large unified endpoint management systems that can do a ton of different things, and it might be great for some large enterprise customers that have the people to actually go out, set those up, understand the entire process, and the money to actually pay for the cost of the licensing as far as that goes. But that can also be like going to Costco. You come home with a big pack and it's going to expire by the time that you actually start to get through it all, and it doesn't make sense in every scenario. So there's more specialized tools that can help you just take bites out of the IT chunks, so you can understand your exact needs, look at those needs, and find the tools that address them in the best way possible. And generally, these tools are so specific that they're just doing one thing and they're doing it great, rather than trying to work on a number of different things and just kind of losing ability in the massiveness of the actual product. Spencer is here to talk a little bit more about the product and how Smart Deploy works, but on this bottom line, we actually really started far on the left side of our Windows deployment tool, and we wanted to make that process as great as possible for IT administrators so that it was easy. We're always setting up and giving an employee back a new device that's going to function perfectly every time. Over time, we've taken some of those core competencies, and one of the major ones is drivers. We handle drivers for you, and that's a great delighter for customers. And we've actually taken that and applied that and moved more towards the middle with driver update to online systems. And Spencer will kind of go over more of that stuff that we're working on as well.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Eric. So, in terms of these in-place upgrades, a lot of customers aren't really thinking about using reimaging for doing this work. And we're sort of here to challenge that and say that might be a reality for you. I mean, a lot of customers are used to making images with sector-based tools and trying to have those, make a separate image for each device that they want to reimage would kind of take that off the table. But with Smart Deploy, it doesn't really work that way. You can have one image that can work on everything, and it's super fast and easy. And so we're just surfacing that there may be a possibility of putting some control back into your hands as IT professionals to reimage systems and get on the latest versions on your schedule, rather than going through this sometimes unreliable in-place upgrade process. So a lot of you are familiar with old school way of doing reimaging and getting OS and apps on different systems, and Smart Deploys kind of blended the two worlds of an old way, doing an old school job in a new school way. The way this works is Smart Deploy lets you use a centralized single image management practice where you get to make your images based off of the software that you want and not about the hardware that you happen to support. So images with Smart Deploy they're all hardware independent, and that's not just a marketing thing, it's a technical reality where when we create an image, we build that from a virtual machine and sanitize it. So we use Microsoft's same imaging file format. So if you're an MDT or a WDS or a config manager shop, you're familiar with WIM. It's file-based in nature, not hard disk sector-based, in contrast to a lot of imaging tools you might be familiar with, which allows for greater flexibility and serviceability. And then separately, we handle all the device driver management for you. And as Eric mentioned, that's what we've realized is one of the big customer delighters is that you really almost get to treat thick clients like a VDI system. So it's really handy in that way without a lot of the drawbacks. You get native performance on the endpoint. You get offline capability and compute power and a real device that customers are used to using. And then from there, at deployment time, we kind of put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and all the software that needs to go on the device and all the hardware and device drivers lay down perfectly every time. Under the hood, Smart Deploy takes care of a lot of the traditional imaging challenges for you. We'll run sysprep for you or run any custom scripts or tasks that you want to run. But it's a simple and great way to consistently and reliably ensure that your end users have everything they need every time. Common scenarios are really operating system upgrade projects or simple hardware refresh. A lot of organizations are buying new hardware, and it's getting harder and harder to run even Windows 7 on brand new devices, and Smart Deploy is able to help customers through a lot of those challenges. Like Aaron mentioned, we're independent and we listen to customers and we hear you. You're talking loudly about how you've loved these driver packs and everything. And so, like Eric mentioned, we recently added a new feature where you can right-click from our console and just update the drivers on a machine rather than needing to re-image it. A lot of customers are interested in doing imaging over the internet, and so we're now getting to the point where you can use third-party cloud storage providers like Google Drive, OneDrive, or OneDrive for Business, Box, and others that customers have prioritized to store your images there. The cost of that storage is cheap, or in some cases free. You're not paying Smart Deploy an additional premium for that kind of storage and capability, right? And you can do imaging over the internet, which is great for branch office, a remote home user. We can even do it without a VPN connection. So pretty exciting stuff. And then coming soon, customers, like Eric mentioned on that slider bar capability, we're getting further to that right-hand side where customers want more than just imaging, and they're asking for in-place upgrades of discrete applications. And so that's coming. We welcome your feedback when you guys are interested in piloting those things out. Let us know, and we'll get you access to that. I did want to give you a quick little product tour and demo so that you can have some idea about what Smart Deploy looks like. So when you install Smart Deploy, you get this centralized console. This is kind of like the build side to where you would create your images, manage your drivers, create answer files to help automate your deployments. This is kind of the central console area. As you notice, when you launch this, you have this nice activities section, and even on rollover, these tiles tell you what you're going to need to do or what that step is going to do. There's videos baked in. The point is that this should be easy. We're trying to dignify the role of an IT professional and make your job easier and faster and hopefully a little bit more enjoyable. In this way, you could take a look and say, hey, we're a Microsoft shop and we like the Surface device, and you could come and pick, hey, we've got the Surface Pro 2 in this case. Go ahead and hit download, and away you go. You'd have full support for that particular device. You repeat that till you have all the device drivers for your different machines. But everything's simple and straightforward to do. And the point is, here's a good example where you could tie in with Google Drive. I have one sample machine out here that's connected to the system, and it should be able to just right-click and hit deploy now or schedule sometime in the future. So we'll go ahead and hit schedule now. Pick what you want to deploy, and you can see I've got a Google Drive image here. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And that's really it. That's a zero touch, right click, hit deploy. It's going to push an image down from Google Drive to this virtual machine I have running next to it here. Let's kick off here shortly. But similarly, you can see that I could have just updated the device drivers now or scheduled it sometime in the future as well. We try to keep everything centralized and organized for you, from your images to your reference machines, all of your platform packs, which are our driver packs. We update these things all the time. Here just it gives you a little indicator as to, hey, there's an update available for this particular one, and you could right click and say, update, and we'll get you the latest version. You can see it's pretty quick. This machine's already rebooted. So basically, we sent the signal down to that machine that it should be re-imaged. We send the boot WIM information down to it, restart, and then rather than rebooting into full Windows, we come into our Windows PE environment. Since we've got that answer file that's baked in, we know what to do with the deployment. So that's a quick little demo of a zero-touch push deployment from Google Drive to a device. So that's just a little sample of Smart Deploy. I wanted to give you a quick little look and feel. And with that, I will turn the time back over to Heidi to kind of wrap things up here.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Thank you, everyone. This was really great. So just a couple quick things here. If you'd like to go ahead and try the product, feel free to do so. You can head over to smartdeploy.com/free trial and download the free trial. So we're going to jump into the Q&A here. Please feel free to send in your questions. We've had a bunch of questions kind of pouring in throughout the presentation. So we're just going to jump right in here and ask, get some answers to some of these. So from a best practice standpoint, James wants to know, how often would you recommend blowing a computer away?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are some dependency factors here, right? So one of the biggest stages for us has been like Alan said, right? As those partition changes or actual underlying system changes crop up, it's a really good time to actually look at reimaging the device. That might be every 2, as we've seen it so far, every 2 editions of Windows 10 that come out, but you could possibly go along farther than that. Disk space becomes a consideration. You have to be actively running disk cleanup on that. You'll probably, want to monitor bugs that are coming up or issues that are coming up on those machines and see if it makes sense to fix it from a break fix standpoint, to actually just reimage the device to get it up and running. But yeah, I think as a general rule, just anytime those major system updates happen where they change something that's part of the underlying architecture, it's a good time to actually redeploy some of those machines.
Thanks, Eric. We have a few different questions around the Dell case solution, or the case K2000. Spencer, maybe you can help with this one. How do you stack up against case?
Yeah, they're both trying to accomplish a similar task and doing it in different ways. We have customers that have moved from case for a number of reasons. Certainly there was some uncertainty with acquisition and what Dell decided to do with the product. There's 2 devices. It's a physical or virtual device that you bring into your environment. One of them is focused on the reimaging, the other's on app and patch. So Smart Deploy right now is not, we're building the app and patch capabilities into the product. We should have something for customers to preview within the first half of next year, probably first quarter, January, February time frame, so be closer to parity. But for now, customers tell us Smart Deploy is simpler, easier, and faster, and better supported for diverse hardware environments, and not just, customers a lot of times might have Dell and HP and Lenovo, and the new Surface devices are really cool, and in those kinds of environments, it can be more challenging. Smart Deploy is really doing all of the heavy lifting around device driver management and hardware management for you. So you get simple wizards. It's really easy. I mean, you build a virtual machine the way you like it, and that's the most challenging part with using Smart Deploy. And the funny part is, it has nothing to do with us. It's just installing Windows and running Windows updates. So if you can get that part done, Smart Deploy really takes care of the rest for you and automates the deployment. You can do these deployments a number of different ways. Offline deployments are still pretty common. We have some customers, government in particular, that are pretty locked down, and so you can use a USB or DVD all the way through, on your existing network. You could tie in with WDS for Pixie booting. You can use the optional Smart Deploy client and just right-click and hit deploy like I showed earlier, either on-prem or through the cloud. And so, flexible product. And the other piece is the support one. So, Alan's leads our support team and works with Jeff and others to, we have onshore support out of our Seattle-based headquarters that, you can call the guys up and give them a shout and they'll try and help you fix a problem. A lot of customers really appreciate that. So that's my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you. Now, we are at that 30-minute mark. We're a couple minutes over. We'll stick around and continue to answer questions here. And if you have to jump off, we will make sure that an email gets out to everyone who registered for this event, most likely tomorrow, with a link to this recording. So if you need to jump off, thank you for being here. We'll just keep going for a few minutes here. So there's a question around the cloud feature, Spencer. Outside of Google Drive, or whoever wants to answer it, outside of Google Drive, what other cloud storage options do they have?
We've got Microsoft, Box, Dropbox.
Yeah, so there's OneDrive for Business, Google Drive, obviously business version of Google Drive, Dropbox for Business, and we're looking at Box integration as well. It'll be Box Enterprise, not the Box Consumer side, because they don't really allow for a great refresh token cycle to work with the consumer side.
The interesting part, too, is it's faster than we would have expected. A lot of people were like, oh, there's no way. I can barely stream Netflix. How am I going to get my 10 gig WIM down to my machine? But, in our office, we've got pretty good bandwidth. But, I can do a Windows 10 bare metal reimaging in about 30 minutes. But I'll tell you, it'll beat the FedEx truck in cost and time every time. And, that's what customers are faced with now is, the $150 to overnight ship a device plus the trip to the UPS store and all the rest of it, and the risk of losing a machine and an employee being out. I mean, even if it took half a day, you're still faster and cheaper. So give it a shot.
Great. Thanks, Spencer.
And the storage services, real quick, the storage services that we do support were prioritized based on customer feedback. So if there are other services that people are interested in seeing, let us know and we can start working on those things too.
Thanks, Aaron. Is there an agent to be installed on the client?
It's optional.
Yeah, there is an optional agent. So if you want the functionality like Spencer demoed, where you're going to be able to deploy an image to a remote worker that's home without VPN network connection, then you're going to need that client installed so it can talk to our cloud broker and talk back to your console to actually start that deployment. Also, with getting machines into computer management in general, you'll need that client installed so that they can start to show up and you can manage them from there.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Do you recommend installing Smart Deploy on a VM server or a robust desktop?
Either.
Yeah, it really depends on probably the number of machines you have as far as a resource standpoint. You can run it from anything from a laptop to a VM on that laptop and generally be fine. Once you start to get over, the thousands of machines mark, you might want to put it on a desktop or server that has, more dedicated resources.
Great, thank you. And let's see, we have a couple more minutes here. We'll answer a few more questions, and I know we have a bunch that we're not going to get to, but we can, of course, follow up offline and get you the answers that you're looking for. Let's see. So there's some questions around BIOS and UEFI. I know that has come up a lot in conversations here and with customers. Maybe we can just speak to that a little bit, Eric?
Yeah, so in general terms, Smart Deploy will respect the boot method that was used. So if your machines are configured to boot to UEFI, then we'll deploy them UEFI. If they're configured to boot legacy, then we'll deploy them legacy. And all of that partitioning and stuff is done automatically in the background. So if you were deploying 50 machines and 25 were legacy and 25 were UEFI, that same image deployment session would just take care of everything in the background for you, and they'd come up as normal. There's also an option to configure the BIOS as part of your deployment. So if you have a bunch of legacy machines that you want to upgrade to UEFI, simply just tick a checkbox in our advanced options to turn UEFI on, and you can enable secure boot, and we'll take care of all the BIOS settings on the major manufacturers like Dell and HP.
Yeah, so there's a couple more that talk about somebody asked about TPM provisioning. We can't do that automatically, but we do have the OEM tools from the big three, Dell, HP, and Lenovo, in our boot environment, so you can call those tools to turn the TPM on. BIOS updates are handled from our platform packs. What else? Platform pack. Yeah, our platform packs are built from the drivers on the vendors' websites, and we try to keep them up to date as we can, especially for the new machines. That's where you see a lot of driver churn as the machine gets older. The OEMs, they kind of stop updating the drivers as much, except for when there's a vulnerability and then you get a BIOS update or something. But yeah, what else?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of questions pouring in. So like I said, if we don't get to your question, we will certainly follow up with you. Eric he has a scenario here. So he said, so if I have 50 Dell workstations, different models, perhaps custom configurations, will Smart Deploy know the exact Dell drivers to download and push out to each workstation?
Yeah, so each of our platform packs is built with WMI filters in it to detect the manufacturer, model, and obviously we know the operating system based on the image that's being deployed. So within those platform packs, so it would be just like going up to Dell and downloading all the device drivers that the OEM said, these are the devices that come in one of these machines. So if you happen to have a desktop and you added some fancy aftermarket graphics card, that might not be included in our default pack, but that's certainly something that you could manually add as well. But in general, in your scenario, of those 50 machines, if there were 50 different machines of 50 different configs, and you had the pack for each, which we pretty much have everything Dell Business Class up on our website right now, you'd be just fine, ready to go. It would apply all the drivers, in most cases where the BIOS was out of date, flash it, and get you up to where you needed to be.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Eric. We'll answer one last question here. It sounds like someone just wants to have a clarification here on how Smart Deploy works. So will Smart Deploy work for a customer who is off the network in their home, for example?
Yep. So we can do that a couple of ways. One, you could ship them a USB key that has everything on it, like if they were in a really limited bandwidth environment, and they could do that themselves. If they've got an internet connection, then you could do the cloud deployment without a VPN to that device and reimage that machine from your end at a schedule, either scheduled or on demand when you choose. And coming soon-ish is the ability to reimage over Wi-Fi as well. So you can do a zero-touch push deployment to a home user over Wi-Fi, which is pretty awesome.
Thank you, Spencer. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call this for the day. Thank you so much for being here, and watch your inbox tomorrow for a link to the recording in case you missed anything or would like to go back and review or send it around to your coworkers. We really appreciate you being here. Feel free to jump in and take a look at Smart Deploy. Give it a try. The trial is fully functioning, so you have full access. You can deploy deploy computers with your trial and keep all the work you do during that trial period. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we will be in touch. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you.